Good late Tuesday, early Wednesday. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving a look at those temperatures across the region. You do see here 70 still on the board at 2:30 in the morning if you're watching live. But that's the storyline, and that kind of just indicates we have more humidity around, and things aren't all that nice out there like they were in that refreshing air. I mean that 50 type of degree reading, those 50s, on the different thermometers here as we were looking, especially early last week in some spots. Unfortunately, now we're not really seeing that even in my rural area here east of Stark. We're 73 degrees. I mean, that is not an ideal type of reading here for late September into fall now, and it's not what you want to deal with. So I just have to be mindful of that. I know we have needed the rain here. Some spots did get it on that Tuesday, including us here east of Stark. And I look back at the last 12 hours with the rainfall here. We were one of the lucky ones here. I mean, it did come down real quick, so it could cause a little bit of pond in the water here and there. But we got about 3/4 of an inch here on our rain gauge east of Stark. On the actual estimates, maybe a little bit less overall, even so in here. I mean, we got more than what this is so in here. This is so quick. I mean, that blue area is about or about 2/3 of an inch, even though we got 3/4 of an inch here. But otherwise, it's showing even less amount. I mean, you see parts of start not getting anything here last 12 hours. I mean, but for some parts of Baker County there, south of McClinney, you see some of these areas getting over 2 inches. So that's an interesting storyline here as we're looking at as we're tracking things in the Ward Weather Center. So I know we're watching these storms when they pop up right now, not so much. I mean, I'll go back 4 hours and you see we had quite a bit on the radar, but not the storyline now. As we look toward the north and west, and then we have a marginal risk of severe weather for that Wednesday in play here as we're looking from Texas up into Kentucky. I mean, give or take, you see a little bit of the Boothville, Missouri in here, maybe a little bit of Illinois, but you can kind of see what we're dealing with as we do have even a severe thunderstorm warning at this late hour in southwestern Arkansas. I know that tornado threat on that Tuesday was supposed to go up, maybe be a little bit higher than it ended up being there in the state of Arkansas, which is, the state moniker is a natural state. I did a project on that, you're in high school, that's why I remember that. But anyway, you have a severe thunderstorm warning until about 1:45 a.m. Central Time. 60-mile-an-hour wind gust, quarter size hail there around the Nashville, Arkansas community. I'll zoom in just a little bit tighter here. I know as you're seeing there's some of these different communities being impacted here by this severe thunderstorm, condition here as we're tracking things. 60-mile-an-hour wind gust and quarter size hail, a possibility there. So look how hot it is. I mean, it is 1:30 in the morning in Dallas, county there, Tarrant County. We have some 80s on the board. I mean, 84, 85 in late September here in the middle of the night. Yuck. Ugh. It's not good. I mean, as we're looking and as we're tracking things here, I mean, you do see the dividing of the air masses, though, and that we have some cool air that's trying to make its way in, to sift in the winds. That's indicative, of a boundary here. That's why we have some of the severe weather in play. Again, not seeing as much of a tornado threat, but we had some, a lot of severe thunderstorm warnings, flash flood warnings in Arkansas and far eastern Oklahoma on that Tuesday there. More so east of Tulsa, even, not right in Tulsa, but some of those areas in eastern Oklahoma, bordering into Arkansas, we had some different polygons popping on up as we're tracking things. Now, one thing you might notice here, I mean, we have the warm air. That means you definitely can't roll out hurricane season. Yeah, we have some very warm water still in the different basins, and you see something here that might update on this a lot. That's one advantage we have by going so late. I know some folks, may not like it because it is really late. But this does give us an advantage here in that we can get some of the latest guidance. So I suspect, and it's not a guarantee it'll happen, but we should get some model updates with our different plots. And you see we have some issues with that blue plot here right now. That is the H-warp indicator here from the last run. Again, we get different updates on this, but, some of the others not as concerning for the U.S. Moving west or Bermuda, but not toward us in the United States at least. Nothing's really showing, on the more reliable model, something hidden directly on our area here in the next, week or so with any of the Atlantic activity. There have been some, ensemble plots that have shown something. We're not turning logo red. I'm not overly concerned, but I would just watch because we could have something really interesting go on, and it's not a good thing. As I look here, we have more than one system that we're kind of looking at, and that makes it kind of complicated, and we may have something that makes this really complicated here because, based on what I see in the plot, generally I wouldn't be too concerned about us here in Florida, Georgia at all. I'd almost just write it off, say we're going to have the rip current rest, and the coastal impacts and kind of be done with it, but have to watch toward the Carolinas based on what I'm seeing for sure. But with this here, we do have something called, and I haven't talked about it too much over the years, but it's called the Fujiwara effect here. And that is a concern that we could have come into play because if we have two hurricanes, one serves as a hurricane, maybe one doesn't, but if we actually had two separate hurricanes here that were strong enough, one could push the other in a direction it really wouldn't normally go in because of the overall pattern. And we don't generally have this in the Atlantic Ocean. It's not something we very, have often at all. It's very rare. In the Atlantic, we already have a Gabrielle. It is a major hurricane going off toward the east there. You see this going way off toward the east, toward the area there, like around, you see some of those other countries in there, like Portugal and Spain. So again, be weakening different kind of setup with the low pressure by then in general, but as we're tracking things here, I know it is just important to kind of monitor here the overall meteorological pattern. It's interesting to see with Gabrielle. I'll pull up the infrared satellite here. I don't know how many folks are on it this time of night, so this gives you a little bit of a different way of looking at the weather picture when we're doing these late at night like this. But you see our major hurricane again. Not as, distinct as it was earlier on. This isn't going to show it distinct because I can't go back more than just a few hours here, 4 hours. But it had a really well-defined eye going back to that early Monday there. But you see it's moving away. That's not a concern of the U.S., or at least to Bermuda even. Now, this accident out here, there's a lot of uncertainty. We have a couple different areas. This is the one that if it were to get that together and if it got pushed enough, the pattern would not really favor it coming toward Florida at all here, but if somehow it was this other hurricane was able to push it and kind of push the overall pressure patterns not out of the way, but kind of make a dent into them here, then it could go further west than we would think. Now, I really don't think we'd have direct impacts on Florida right now. Generally, I'd almost, like I say, write it off completely, but because of some weird stuff in the model, I don't want to do that yet. Because it's kind of an odd situation because this is Sunday here, according to the one model out in here. But what if our other system somehow pushes it further west, and then all of a sudden we have a hurricane out here on Sunday? Then we do have some coastal impacts. So that's not what most of the models are showing. But some have shown some weird stuff with this, and we don't generally see this in the model. And we had this. I believe Marco was involved, and I think it got pretty much destroyed by another tropical cyclone. We're watching back in 2020, so I just thought, that was the last time we had that potential in the model, really, and, that crazy 2020 season. We've had a lot of crazy hurricane seasons lately, but, I just don't want to completely write this off here is what I'm trying to say. I know it's been a really calm weather period lately. It's going to start to uptick some, even if it's not in the form of this tropical cyclone concerns locally, too much. We will have to watch for some stronger storms later Thursday here. And even if they're into Friday, maybe even impacting, with some storms into high school football Friday night. Unfortunately, as folks maybe are watching those games and or watching the FSU UVA game on ESPN there, the Knowles, number 8 officially in the EP rankings, Tommy Castellanos there looking like he's going to be healthy. Going up there to Charlottesville, Virginia. We'll have to see if we get any rain up there out ahead of any type of, the overall pattern. We may end up having just the boundary there even. But 40-50% chance of rain for that right now. But, he's a great quarterback. They're going to go up against another great quarterback there. In that one for UVA, the Virginia Cavaliers. We're looking there, of course, at the quarterback there. Morris, Chandler Morris. What a star he's been there on the field. I think they scored 48 points against Stanford the other night. So, I mean, it's not going to be easy on the road on a Friday night. Could have some weather impacts. Chandler Morris there. He's been in quite a few schools, but he's been a decent player over the years. He's 24. I'm just looking it up here. I kept in my eye. That's just how things are now with the different years here, getting the extra years and the like. I mean, that just shows you here, I mean, the maturity and the like. As we're looking and as we're tracking things, it's been in college since 2020, and this just kind of goes to show here, that has that experience to maybe beat the Knowles on a Friday night. Knowles have to be on upset alert for sure. It's not the toughest. I mean, you have Miami, you already had Alabama, you have Florida, even I know they've not been good, but on the road, that's a tough environment. But UVA is on the uptick here with Chandler Morris and the Cavaliers. So if the Knowles can go in there on Friday night, and get a win that's, at least, one that's not just, where they're just squeaking by, even then they deserve a lot of credit. But if they're winning by quite a bit, they should, get a lot of credit in the rankings. I don't think they will get the credit they deserve. But, Chandler Morris, Tony Elliott's really doing well. They beat Coastal Carolina here by 41 points on August 30th. They did barely lose NC State, tough environment, but then they beat Stanford by 4 touchdowns there. As we're tracking things, Morris had 4 touchdowns there in that one itself. I mean, they won 48-20, but Stanford, I know they're not that good, but to beat another team by 4 touchdowns that you're not used to playing over the years. What a job there by, that squad. Tony Elliott really started to turn them around. This could be a signature win, and Mike Norvell and the Knowles have to remain on alert there in that game up in Charlottesville as we're looking ahead and toward the timeline. You see here 67 degrees right now as we are looking up there in that part of Virginia. Let's go ahead and put on the DFS model run. We get this information in the latest run. So let's go ahead and I'll broaden it just a little here. I don't want to lose Charlottesville in the map. I'm going to take up the current radar. And then I'm going to go ahead and put on the model. And I just want to see what this latest run was showing here. So earlier on, I know last weekend when I was looking, it was looking more concerning with the timing than it currently is. But it doesn't mean it just couldn't change. I'm going to broaden it because it may not be exactly right now. You see some of the places, Washington, D.C., Richmond, Roanoke. You see Charleston, West Virginia. But then I'll zoom back in a little bit here, and you'll see Elkins, West Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia, and the like. But let me go ahead and zoom, here with this. You see at 5 p.m. Friday, there could be some activity on the radar, but maybe displaced from where it's at, or it might be like this, and they get kind of lucky for the time being there. That's 8 o'clock, so the game would have been going for an hour. And then maybe you have some showers late in the game, but not overwhelming. But if this shifts just a little bit, it could be something that's a real bad. It could cause fumbles, could be equalizer. And the Knowles have to remain on upset alert there. Over the years, I mean, UVA knocked off the Knowles in the 90s there when they had a big ACC winning streak going. I mean, even UVA, they beat us here going back in a game. Everybody thought the Knowles would win a few years ago. This is a game the Knowles have to be an upset alert for here. As we're looking at this one, a very tough environment there on a Friday night. The whole country watching this. If they're not watching high school football, it's, I know that's a controversial thing, quite honestly, because it's not. Sometimes I wasn't going up against the high school games, but that's a topic for another day. But a lot of the country, if they're not watching high school football, they have their eyes peeled on this game. And Tommy Castellanos there, what a big time, game. This is one where FSU fans, including me, did not expect to beat Alabama generally. The last 2 games, you expected to win big. They did. Now, this game on Friday night there on ESPN at 7 o'clock, assuming we don't have any lightning or anything, that's when it'll be starting. Bob with Susan, along with Lewis Riddick on the call, and Chris Budden will be the sideline reporter. So this is a big one here for the Knowles there in Charlottesville on a Friday night at 7. You can see this is the 11 o'clock simulated radar Friday night, so some showers could be a factor there. As we're looking temperature-wise, we're seeing 60s at 11, and then the orange is indicative of lower 70s at 8 p.m. and they backed it up just a little bit. So that's where that game will be there. It's a tricky game. Those fans know it. I mean, you're thinking, okay, we're looking ahead to Miami. You absolutely cannot do that here. This is a very tricky game. Miami they got a bye week before and after the FSU game coming up next Saturday night, 7:30, on ABC there in Tallahassee at Oak Campbell Stadium. But that game, could lose the cachet, that it currently has if FSU loses this game in Charlottesville against the Virginia Cavaliers. I know, there's expectations of some different things. I know Lee Corso, he's retired from ESPN now, but he may be coming back, to be honored during that game, something to that effect, and probably still be honored. But, ESPN call it game day. Maybe he could be the guest picker on there. But if FSU loses to Miami, then, or excuse me, they might lose to Miami, but if they lose to Virginia first, that's why you can't look ahead. It's a point I'm doing it too, but you can't look ahead because if they lose to UVA, maybe you don't have that, guest picking of Lee Corso. So you don't have maybe the top people going there. They might be headed to the Vandy and Alabama game instead. I know that's hard to believe, but thinking about Vandy over the years, but they're top 25. Alabama, they lost to FSU, but that could be a battle of, teams there that those folks, really want to showcase here in the Southeastern Conference. A game after a year ago, it was a historic game with Vandy upsetting Alabama. So, you just have to wait and see. That's your temperature forecast there. 70s. Let's go ahead. We'll take it to our local view at this time frame. You see a little warmer. Some red in the 80s. The orange is in the 70s. That's 8 p.m. And this is the potential radar look at things. And Bradford playing at Keystone there. And there could be some shower activity according to this. So I'll have to be remaining alert for that. Could have some shower activity. This is, it's going to be just by some probably. It's not really exactly right. Maybe pretty far off even because we're a few days out at the lower res, view on the model. But already to come up, could have some rain here. We shall see. That's Friday night. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So it's always just important to be watching things here. Always important to be watching the meteorological pattern here as we're giving you guys the latest on the scenarios. I know we have the latest Friday outlook yet. We do not from the SPC, but we have the Thursday outlook, and we have, for the first time in a while, they did put it in yesterday on day 3, but we have a risk of severe weather, marginal. But we haven't had one of these in a while around here, really. So let me go ahead and send that to you on the other system. As we look at things, as we track them here, I'm going to pull it up on the source computer because I wasn't 100% sure updated right in the other system because sometimes these boundaries can change a little. I want to make sure I'm sending you the latest. So this is the latest here. It's about the wind. The hail's not showing up. The tornado threat, very low, not zero, but same with the hail, very low, but not zero. But the wind is what's triggering a marginal risk for around Albany there and Tifton and some of those areas there in towards southwestern to south central Georgia on that Thursday later on. The risk goes all the way from New Orleans up through Boston. It's a low one, but it's not zero. So you got to remain alert here with the boundary, obviously. That's trying to give us cool air, but not going to really do a whole bunch. It's going to help a little. We'll see how we maybe get bigger fronts later on. Some of this stuff can help keep hurricanes away. We have to just be careful in case the pattern shifts around on us unexpectedly. But let's just go ahead and say you guys here another look at things now. I have the modeling for Friday night, but let's see the current view again. North Mississippi, there's some storms right now between Oxford and Tupelo. You see southwest Arkansas, severe thunderstorm warning there, and boy, we have another one in Texas. This is northeast of Odessa, Texas there. As you're looking between Lubbock and Odessa in general, but as you're seeing there, that's one. Let's see, Borden, Martin, Howard, Dawson counties there in western Texas. The Midland Odessa office issuing that. It doesn't include just barely Big Spring, that community there in toward Texas. So a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings late hour. I do have some flash flood warnings as well, like in Atoka County, Oklahoma, Pulaski, Arkansas, including Little Rock, Marshall County, Oklahoma, and Logan County, Kansas. You see some areas in Kansas, all that rain. You see around Colby, we had some. You see here in Durant to Atoka, 3-4 inches there in some of these spots. As we're looking there, quite a bit of rain in some of these areas here. Toward the River Valley and the like in Arkansas, you see some spots over 1/2 foot. Yale area there, and some of the other spots there in the ward areas, northwest of Russellville. But even in Little Rock, some areas 2-3 inches last 12 hours. So it's been wet. We're going to get some of this, and then we got 3/4 of an inch. It's just dark on that Tuesday, more than most folks. We needed it. Things, I mean, that's more rain than we've had all month combined here. East to dark by a long shot. I'm sure I didn't double check that, but I think we only had like 1/10 the whole month, so something like that. And now we had that much, 3/4 of an inch in, 30 minutes, give or take. So that, be a little bit too much sometimes, but we do need it because we have some drought concerns that I've talked to you guys about as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them. So again, the tropics, you see these plots here toward the east, and that's something to be mindful of here. Again, I don't want to completely let our guard down with all this because it's a situation here if we do, and then all of a sudden the pattern kind of nudges things. You get that Fujiwara effect, and then all of a sudden you get the low to go quite a bit further west, and then people are really caught off guard. So, we have to just pay attention. No turning the logo red or anything. If you had a forecast track right now, it wouldn't even hit North Carolina, much less come that close to Florida. I don't think it's going to hit Florida. I don't think it's going to come that close. North Carolina might be a different story, but if I think it's going to be like, a certain place, eastern Bahamas, you're not going to be following the blue track. That's an outlier still at this point, but let's say it did, and then all of a sudden it got in, we had another storm pushing it west, then all of a sudden you have a situation where you have some coastal impacts here that start to be kind of escalated, not maybe direct yet, but you start to have some coastal flooding, and then people kind of get caught off guard. So just want to be careful because we haven't dealt with that much here in the Atlantic, hardly ever. You talk about it in the models like this, and it didn't really happen. It's really hard to get two hurricanes to form in this close proximity, and for one to be able to push the other around. I know that sounds crazy, but look it up. It's the Fujiwara effect. And it didn't really happen much in the Atlantic. If it happened, though, things could kind of, all of a sudden, the models might adjust because they're not thinking it's going to happen, and it does, and then we have like a big correction in the modeling, and we start to have issues with not much time to prepare. So always important to have that hurricane kit up to date. I'm not that concerned right now, especially locally, further north, but, let's say the track's 100 miles east of Cape Hatteras there, and then all of a sudden you have something push it west, and then you have a direct landfall. It shifts last second. You never know. Things could meander around in a weird way. Just remain alert. But, especially if you have travel plans or watching not in our local area directly. But Gabrielle's out there right now. Still a hurricane moving east. You see Umberto, Imelda, Jerry, your next names. The next two names, probably will be, will be those areas out there. I'm saying that in a weird way. But, those two areas there that I was pointing out, we'll probably get those next two names. Not sure which will get it first, but maybe that, one further east may get Umberto and the other one Imelda. But I don't want to start, trying to pinhole the names in there. And then I know back in, 2019 we had Imelda, a big story in the tropics and the Gulf. We had Umberto in the Gulf in 2007. Maybe not so much Umberto because it was a quick one, Cat 1. Still surprised folks with going from nothing to a Cat 1 real quick, hit around Lake Charles, maybe a little west to Beaumont. Some impacts there that were pretty substantial, But then Imelda was a storm system as we're tracking things. That was a big flooding threat there, and a big flood situation in East Texas. So, Southeast Texas, and, that region there around Beaumont, give or take. Just remain alert. You see our systems. This is what I've been talking about. You have Gabrielle, but we have two other systems. This is your 2 a.m. NHC update from the National Hurricane Center Miami. The one over the 7-day period to the west has an 80% chance of ultimately forming more so in that red circled area than where it is now, east of Puerto Rico, as we're tracking things there. But then as we're kind of monitoring things, I know it's a situation here where the other one has a 90% chance. That one wouldn't probably directly impact, but it could push something closer to the U.S. We'll have to make sure some models have kind of merging, which is really weird. But anyway, but some of it that, modeling it sowing stuff like that has a recovering away, which would be good. So it may be more bark than bite, but there's some weird things I've hardly ever seen, where we could have two interact like this. I just don't, something could all of a sudden change in the models like this because it's not maybe putting the models too much. That this could actually, some models show up, but for it to actually happen, then it might throw the models off, and we could start, getting concerned. People haven't been paying attention all that much because they haven't really needed to. I mean, hadn't been really, alert, and then all of a sudden we get some weird solution here, and forecast tracks all of a sudden shift, and then people get caught off guard. So it's always important to have your hurricane kit up to date just in case here. It's kind of a tricky situation because we still have the next few weeks we have to watch. Peak of hurricane season here still lasts till about October 10th. And that's when we had around October 10th over the years, Michael 1 to 10th, Matthew, Milton. So, of course, last year, this week, we had one of the worst storms we've ever seen here in the U.S., and that was Helene. And it was, one of the most impactful ever in the country. The anniversary coming Friday night, ironically, right about that time, maybe a little after one of the FSU games, and then this one, the 1-year anniversary of this terrible storm, hitting is. I know it could have just, quite honestly, like it destroyed areas there around the coast in Taylor County, Dixie County. It could have done something like that further west instead, and then it could have still caused extreme wind damage around Tallahassee. They got really lucky. Kate's still the benchmark storm for Tallahassee, despite Michael to the west, Helene to the east. But, it's something where Perry, this is their benchmark storm, Madison, that community, Monticello, Live Oak, Valdosta, all those areas. This is the benchmark storm since we've been keeping the records with the names, at least going back to 1950, using the terminology of the names. So this is doing it like that, and this is the benchmark storm here. Dahlia really was for a year, and then this overtook it. In the record books, just an unbelievably disastrous storm in western North Carolina. Somehow it was worse. In the mountains up there where all the flooding happened, people caught off guard there. We'll be able to really warn people about the storm surge, and out here, even though it was terrible, people were able to get out up in the mountains, North Carolina. It's not something that's easy to match. A storm like this going all the way up there and doing the destruction it did with all that flooding. So you just got to remain alert here for these conditions up in toward those areas there. You just have to remain alert for these rapidly changing conditions here for sure. So again, there was some talk that it would be historic up there. Don't get me wrong, the Weather Service in Greenville, South Carolina did, put that out. It's not something that we talked about a lot here because we had to focus on our local 62 county area. That was obviously, and it should have been, and it was the priority. Of course, we had floods in Texas this year, and it was messaged pretty well, wasn't maybe using the word historic ahead of time, but we had all that just horrific flooding there toward, the Texas Hill Country with the remnants, of a tropical system merging with some other factors a few days after that was over. And that was even more of a shock, Roy, than what happened in western North Carolina, as bad as that was. I know a lot of the factors in the Hill Country, Texas, had to deal with, of course, just, being a holiday and everybody was in a more vulnerable position than normal. But we were talking about homes just being, wiped away all over the place in western North Carolina that people live in, all the time here, as well did anyway. But again, this is the radar, 11:10 p.m. on that fateful Thursday, September 26th there, the Tallahassee radar perspective. We were on here giving you the latest. We have a little bit of power issues here and there, but I know you can go back on YouTube, watch the coverage. I'll try to be pulling some clips up of that coverage here as we look ahead, because that's one of the bigger events we ever covered here at Cloud Weather. We've had a few different things that maybe you could call the biggest. I don't know. I mean, for some of our area, it was the biggest event we've had since we've been doing this year, 6 years or so at Cloud Weather. For other parts of the area, not so much. But, I mean, here and there, I mean, it just varies, obviously. But it's up there, and it's something that we'll never forget here at Cloud Weather. I'll never forget, tracking that situation. That Category 4 storm, just an unbelievable disaster for those poor folks up there in toward these areas. Stark got spared for the most part into the power is flickering, but it wasn't that storm of record here, obviously. We keep talking about the different storms of record here in toward the weather center. And I'm going to throw that graphic in here. Just gonna go ahead and make it a little audible here because I didn't have it in the show tonight, but I think it's worth talking about again. Our storms of record, obviously, after everything that's happened here with the different storms, it's just unbelievable the different impacts we've had. It's absolutely heartbreaking, obviously. We should look toward the different communities. Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and this is a Cat 4 was catastrophic. Surge was catastrophic in areas that didn't even have the wind that was catastrophic. Wasn't maybe quite as bad as Michael, but unlike Idalia, it was just terrible. This one, Helene, actually did get retired. We'll never use that name again in the basin. We'll never use that name again. In the Atlantic Basin, Helene, so catastrophic. So many ways here. The human toll. So many folks losing their life. As we look back here, this is what I was talking about, a storm of records. Some of these have been, since we've been doing cloud weather, some of them not so much. I mean, it's kind of tricky in a way because, as you kind of look here, Helene, since we've been doing cloud weather now, some of these, it's a little bit tricky because, like Michael, we weren't officially doing cloud weather then, but we did post some updates about that. That's modern times, obviously, very, recent memory here as we're looking. So, actually on this map, Helene's actually, Idalia would have been in here the year before, but technically Helene's the only one since we've been officially doing cloud weather, but when I talk about big events, the Tallahassee tornado last year, we've had various tornadoes all over the area since we've been doing this for 6 years. And Michael, before we were doing cloud weather, of course, and and like Irma, did some updates on social media for that. Matthew, same type of deal, but we weren't calling it cloud weather. We weren't doing the more than more than once a week updates covered for every tornado warning storm and the like. So didn't have it, in what we have now, but with the more centralized look and the like. But obviously we weren't doing it for Cade or Dora. I wasn't around for either one of those. Alberto, I was almost around for that, but not, quite. 1994, that's when I was born. But anyway, as we're looking here, it's a terrible, terrible situation. Obviously, I had relatives impacted by Alberto, up there in towards southwestern Georgia. So, just an awful, awful, awful situation up there in toward those different communities that names that have been retired, as we've talked about a lot here over the years on cloud weather. All that flooding there, just the water rising many feet up in some spots with the rivers. That Flint River, just an absolute disastrous situation there. As we were looking, at that, reading through all that here, talking about the storms of record, the worst tropical cyclone, based on my subjective analysis since 1950 by county in our 62 counties that we do cover. I know the differentiation here between Michael, Helene's kind of interesting. You see like Turner counties and Michael, but look at power outage numbers. But Ben Hill and Irwin, Helene was worse based on the analysis. But you see that little corridor there that still, after all these storms, all these years, Kate there in 85 still takes the top spot since we've been naming the Hurricane Center and the like have been naming systems in the, basin. They've been doing that since 1950. So, but this is based on my analysis of things here as we're looking, as we're tracking. So, but yeah, Cat 4 Storm Helene, an anniversary coming on up here soon. Just an unbelievably horrific storm. Just an awful, awful set of circumstances, obviously. Just one of the most impactful ever in the history of the country. Just a terrible, terrible sequence for sure as we're looking at things. Back to the graphics, the show we go here on this other view. You can see towards some of these areas, maybe Swanee River Valley, not as much rain next 7 days in general. West Tallahassee up to Albany a little bit more, Jacksonville over to St. Augustine a little bit more. So that's kind of the storyline there. As we're looking, I know you do see a lot up toward western North Carolina, a few inches, but nothing like what we had in Helene, obviously. We'll see some, you could have some spots flooding here and there in North Carolina and some of those places up that way, but East Texas, Northeast Texas, seeing quite a bit of rain. I know you have interactive radar, carter.com/radar. You see quite a bit of rain in South Florida. They do need some of that precip over there. We do have a destructive severe thunderstorm warning though in southwest Arkansas. I mean, it's 2 in the morning out there. We actually have it because of hail. You know, not something you see all that often here. Let me pull this up then for those that are watching live to give you this look at things. So, this is that view of it. They're still calling it, yep, 1:59 a.m. Central destructive storm for Nashville, Arkansas out there. This warning goes for Hempstead and Howard counties. We're talking about maybe baseball-sized hail, not even severe winds, but baseball-sized hail in that area. I don't see that all that often, to be quite honest. I know it's on the edge of some radars, so maybe they're getting lucky and it's not quite as bad, you know, as it looks there in toward those areas, but we'll just have to wait and see. The hail path on our other system was so in an ominous situation there with some purple sun up almost 3 inches in diameter, but it has brought down the numbers a little bit now, closer to 1.61 inches east of Mineral Springs, Arkansas. This is the southwest part of the state. I know in northeast of Texarkana, it's not, you know, one that maybe like Fayetteville or Little Rock where more attention being paid. It's not an area that gets as much attention here generally. Middle of the night here in September, they have a hailstorm, maybe baseball size. It's kind of noteworthy there. So that's, you know, the storyline. Hempstead and Howard in Arkansas. That's a thunderstorm morning till 2:30 a.m. Central Time. So it's kind of a storyline there. Another thing I see that this came up on our system, which I don't love at all. You know, it updated. I did want it to update. I didn't want it to show this, but hopefully this isn't end up how it plays out. But this is a hurricane model. I know it's, you know, kind of having trouble picking up on some of the other systems in here. We have our other area to the east. But on this western system, the hurricane model, this is alarming, even though the other models aren't really picking up on this. This model does good with intensity generally, not so good with track sometimes, but, you know, this is an outlier, and I almost hate to show this, but because of the time frame, because it is, and it only shows so far on our system like this, it doesn't show, like, if I showed the actual mapping, I mean, I can control that a little bit more, and, you know, it goes to like 240 hours. This is not that far out, so, you know, especially for our friends in the Carolinas, I would go ahead and have the hurricane kit up to date. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I would lean against this, to be quite honest right now. It could happen. You know, this is not what many folks, including me, would think would happen, but it's not impossible. You know, something like this. This is alarming, though. This says here the H-warp model in here says a Cat 2 off or a coast. Now, that's 300 miles away, so it's going to be rough and rain conditions here. That's not a big deal for us, but there could be some issues right at the coast. You know, we'll watch, and wouldn't have a tropical storm warning or hurricane warning or anything locally, but this is a problem up toward North Carolina. What this is trying to sell is very alarming, and I don't know. I mean, it's actually, it must be strengthened quite a bit in between the points here because, you know, it almost doesn't make sense. I almost might have to look at this. Because this has a Cat 3 here right off of Wilmington coming across and staying. Cat 3, or maybe even a Cat 4 somewhere in between over land. Okay, we'll watch that. You know, I'm going to check a storm that I remember real quick in history because it's early enough that I don't remember it really well. I want to see if his track looks kind of like what this, you know, is trying to sell before I say it, because it kind of does in a way what this is trying to simulate, but not saying it's going to happen by any stretch, you know. And it was a lot, way stronger to the east, so it's not. But what the storm I'm talking about is Isabel in 03. But I hate even saying that because there's not much model support. It's just a weird thing because this model is one, you know, Euro's not showing it in the U.S. The DFS isn't showing it in the U.S. or even coming that close. This is a hurricane model that generally does better. We don't have a lot of data yet. It's early on. And sometimes with the stronger storms, you don't have much time. I feel like this could happen with the strength. You know, the intensity forecast might be it might be a Cat 3, but hope for all of our sakes here that it's a Cat 3 over open waterway to the east. And that's what I kind of think right now. I think Cat 3 is, you know, there's a decent chance that happens, but it's probably way to the east. Let me see what our GFS indicator is showing. Let's see if it's kind of, let's check our dates here. I know, so today's 24th, so it's showing about, you know, the right timing initially down there as I'm trying to watch it follow the points here. But we're just going to keep on looking here. Eventually, it's going to diverge here and kind of mix around, and you see how it becomes not as, obvious. It kind of gets close to the coast there, but then it kind of just has some different interactions going on. And I wonder what the temperatures are up there, because it's pretty warm. Okay, so that's weird. I mean, you see how it doesn't really come across. That'd make more sense than what the hurricane model's trying to say. Maybe just concentrating on one area there too. I just, that makes me, say, I've got to watch this, because the problem is this isn't 2 weeks away. I'd be very uncomfortable. I would just take it off and say we're not going to talk about it. This is Monday. I mean, Monday here. Today's Wednesday. This is 5 days from now. And it's North Carolina. It's trying to throw a major hurricane in North Carolina. It would catch a lot of folks off guard. Don't think that's going to happen. But if I'm in the Carolinas, if I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, all the way up there through Virginia, I would go ahead and have my hurricane kit up to date. Don't panic. Lean against this happening. But things can change very rapidly here, as we're looking. I just don't particularly love our one hurricane model. So I think the track is wrong, personally, but I can't, rule that out, because it hadn't even formed yet. I just don't want folks to, all of a sudden, we can remember Michael got his head together on a Sunday and hit at the Cat 5 on a Wednesday. So, we just got to be careful here. I just don't want to, write this off. This looks like an issue possibly for the Carolinas. Again, I would lean against it right now, but, I'd just be ready just in case here if I'm in the Carolinas and up into Virginia here. Just be watching. Again, I am not really thinking this wouldn't make in some ways it, I guess it can make sense. It's so warm, and if we have some different effects, this doesn't seem to be showing that. I'd have to look at the actual modeling of it on some of the different sites to know for sure. But yeah, I don't want to give this too much more time, quite honestly. I'm just trying to find another graphic here to show you guys this for those folks up there in North Carolina. If I can. Again, I didn't put this one in the show either, but it's just a preparational graphic just in case. It ain't really priority at this point, but it's something to watch up toward, the Carolinas and Virginia, just in case. I just don't, if it's on a tropical storm or something, I'd say, okay, you guys can handle that. I just don't particularly love seeing the icons pop up like that. But, like in Florida, not up there, maybe, I don't know, but honestly, it probably varies by state, but some tax-free, hurricane supplies. That's the story here in Florida. But in general, a basic disaster supplies kit includes water, non-perishable food, a battery-powered or hand-cranked radio, a NOAA weather radio, flashlight, and first aid kit. Now, you might not, in theory, after a storm, be able to get immediate care, medical care, but that full list is available, ready.gov/kit. Some storm threats require evacuation of especially mobile homes because of high winds. Secure loose objects ahead of time in coastal areas there. Also may have to be evacuated here because the storm surge is threatening the worst case scenarios, like we saw with Helene toward, Mercy Beach and even Dahlia. Hazards are capable of causing total devastation. Inland flooding sometimes is a bigger concern locally in inland areas, bigger concern normally, especially a storm I remember like Debbie here in 2012. Of course, we had last year's Debbie too, but that can cause issues. It's important to try to mitigate that threat before a storm with sandbags and other important items, methods. But yeah, Bay 08 comes to mind. Get necessary supply of cash and gas. Credit card machines may not work there, in the event of a major disaster. I remember going to Mariana there a couple months after Hurricane Michael, and the credit card machine at a restaurant still wasn't working because of all the outages 2 months later. Yeah, I mean, that's unbelievable, Roy. Actually, I headed up there through that area to see the damage going. I know after FSU, I did Mississippi State stuff online and graduated from there. And we headed up there and, looking at the damage on the way up, way back. And, in Mariana, though, I was stopping restaurant, credit card machine wasn't even working 2 months later. So that's why you always got to be ready, gas, cash. But charge up your devices as powered as possible. A storm were to develop like that, and then be ready to move to an interior room in a tornado situation. I know we had that hurricane there. We've had so many lately. As we're looking, it might have been east of ES even out there that had a big tornado threat with it in that similar area. So that's just an interesting storyline there. Again, I kind of hate showing that to you more. I'm probably sending it to you too long, to be quite honest. So let me go ahead and go back over to our show here with the drought. Helped a little on Stark on that Tuesday. Well, we're out here anyway, east of Stark. Other areas still have some drought concerns. So there's a moderate drought Tallahassee over toward Live Oak, over toward Jasper and the like here. As we're tracking things. So just be mindful that, we need some rain. We're going to get some rain, as you saw in the forecasting, at least. So we have to watch out for a couple stronger storms, though, as I alluded to as well. Even some accent maybe impacting Friday Night Football. I hope by then the storms will be kind of a downtrend. But we have to watch for that. We have to watch out for some fog even. I mean, it's so warm right now. 74 now on the thermometer. East of Stark here. 3 in the morning. Ugh, okay, that's not great, but not as bad as what we're showing you in Texas there. But some areas in the 80s still. This late hours, I'm looking not as much around Dallas. It is like downstate now in Texas, but like mid-80s even like around some of these areas there further down along the East Texas coastline. But dense fog, hazardous driving due to low visibility, can cause sometimes just fog advisories to be required. So slow down and give yourself extra time to reach your destination. Make sure your vehicle is as visible as possible to other vehicles by using your low beam headlights. Leave plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you. As we look at that current college football playoff, though, a little bit lighter topic here. As we're tracking things, I know I have Miami number 1 in my rankings, Ohio State number 2. So I have Miami, the ACC champ. I know Florida, I don't think they're that great, but they're not quite as bad as they are looking on the field, maybe. So I got to give Miami a lot of credit, and they're off this weekend, a week after the FSU game. That's not exactly that current FSU some probably, but still they're a really good team. Miami, Mario Cristobal deserves a lot of credit there. Carson Beck's pretty good. I mean, the team he has around him, though, so many parts to it. I mean, it's crazy to see Miami Ohio State 1-2. That's how it was in 2002, I think, going into 2003. Controversial finish there. I remember one of the first college football games I remember watching with my dad, actually, my late dad there, and 2002 and 2003, and Miami probably should have won that game. There was a controversial pass interference call that instead gave Ohio State a chance to end up getting that victory to win the national championship, and that was kind of the end of Miami's running college football, quite honestly, there. That was, and after that, Larry Coker's squad kind of, started to go on a downtrend. That was, a big national title win over Jim Tressel when he was coaching there. And then Oregon, they're number 3, Big Ten second team. That's what I have them as right now. Georgia's my SEC champ. They're 4. You don't have to have the champs anymore in the top 4. They changed that. It's going to be straight rankings as you're looking here. But 3 of the 4 are. Penn State, number 5. Penn State, Oregon playing coming up. That's a big game. A huge game, obviously. But it is, we have the 12-team playoff. So it's not like it was before, for better or worse. It's not like the season's over if you lose one game and a game like that. FSU, they're number 6. I have Iowa State number 7 there. Rocco Beck in the squad. We have Indiana number 8 there. Oklahoma number 9. John Mateer, though, since I did these rankings on, Saturday night, he's now been, listed there as being out for about the next month with an injury. That could affect them. Georgia Tech's number 10. But Oklahoma did beat Temple better if you look at the common opponent, and they were on the road there, so I had to move them all the way up. Some folks, I think even the official rankings had Oklahoma get ahead of FSU just by beating Auburn. Kind of controversial game. So you just kind of, I don't know about that, but, number 9 felt like a good spot for them. I'll put them all the way up in here. Texas Tech, well, their performance at Utah, I could move them up even more, but felt comfortable with this. USF still in here is my group of 5, whatever you want to call it, group of 6, non-power conference champion. As we're tracking things, could end up being Tulane or Memphis or North Texas even. North Texas already had 2 overtime games, but You know, that quarterback there is a good story for that school that in Texas for the Mean Green there. But North Texas UNT. But first team's out, LSU. I know that's probably really controversial. You guys are probably saying they didn't lose, right? Well, they haven't lost yet, but I'm just not very impressed by them, to be quite honest. They have really struggled. I mean, that game against Clemson, that was the reason they were up so high anyway. I mean, Clemson's fallen, right, off here. I mean, Dabo Sweeney, really a lot of folks, I mean, look to him as the moral compass of college football, and including myself. I mean, he's a great guy and everything, and, but it's really been a tough year for him. And it's something where they really struggle. So that OSU win over Clemson doesn't look near as impressive. LSU struggled with Florida. They needed 5 interceptions. And again, it was pretty close at night in Baton Rouge. It wasn't like they won by 40. It was a close game there, so they don't deserve a lot of credit. Texas, Arch Manning's really struggled. Had trouble with Texas El Paso there for a while. So the team didn't be in the top, 12 here right now in the playoff. TCU's been impressive, but they haven't really played anybody in their games. Some of them, that one there, I know one recently pretty close. Probably didn't make quite that close. Texas A&M there, they're a team that we're looking at as well. They had a big one up at Notre Dame. It's crazy. I think Notre Dame might still be better than Texas A&M, but Notre Dame can't put them up here yet. 1 win and 2 losses, but I think Notre Dame's actually really good. CJ Carr has been very, very impressive there. For the Irish, they've scored so many points, and they almost beat Miami and Miami. I mean, and then the Texas A&M game, I made me think, well, Texas A&M, it might have just been a one-off there, but you got to give them credit to at least put them here. People have them way higher than when I have them, but when the SEC teams start beating each other up here, then some of them will start falling more, and then it's probably more realistic. I mean, it could be a SEC team that's in that I don't have because the other one wins, and then kind of mixes things up. But the SEC, they've been really, a conference here, maybe getting too many teams up there in the higher part of the rankings. So, I mean, give Oklahoma credit for beating Auburn, for beating Michigan. That win looked more impressive. That's one reason I put them up there, because Michigan beat Nebraska and Nebraska. So you got to give them credit between those two games there. They deserve to be up here, or at least maybe not hosting a playoff game, but, at least in the playoffs here. But as of now, that injury, I didn't wait. I do these after like the game Saturday, so it's easier to kind of see how things are going even before the AP's coming out. I've been doing that this year like that, so I'm not really kind of like looking at the other paper here and then like adjusting based on that. I want to have it a little bit more realistic based on what I'm seeing in the games. So it's still early. A lot of teams, obviously with no losses out. This could change really dramatically based on the games when they're actually played. So, of course, USF does have that one loss here. Indiana, what an impressive win by Fernando Mendoza. They're the Cal transfer. So impressive going down on the road there. I mean, you could see Indiana deserves, based on what I've seen, deserves there to host the playoff game right now. You got to give them a lot of credit. Right now, that quarterback for Indiana may end up being one of the favorites for the Heisman. We'll see. Still pretty early, quite honestly. But, just use quarterback Tommy Castellanos. If he, takes care of business against UVA, stays healthy, wins games like against Miami, and all of a sudden he could be the top one in the Heisman race. So, there's a long way to go. And the Heisman isn't the national title. It's not the playoff. I mean, Travis Hunter, he, had a great season last year, won the Heisman, went to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jags are 2-1, but they didn't even go to the playoffs. So, that's not always a criteria or a factor in here. And you can make the argument that it should be, but, maybe make an argument that it happened after the playoff, even Heisman. But as you look here, especially with a 12-team playoff now, there's that extended forecast that you guys have been waiting for. Maybe not for Friday night. Maybe it'll clear out by then some more, but during the day on Friday, at least 60% chance of running storms. Could have some strong to severe storms. That's a possibility. You see 95 here. That is not what you want to see. That's way above average now. 10 degrees is for this Wednesday here. It is hot. Just downright hot. Humid out there as I was out and about on that Tuesday. So that's not what you want to see. But we will have some, semblance of a cool down here coming up. And we love to watch for the rough Atlantic coast beach conditions. I don't want to say watching the tropics yet for local. And I don't want to turn the logo ready yet. Now, if I turn it red, it'd probably be for like the Carolinas for whatever happens tropically, which is still a little ways away. To be 5 days out though, and that one model showing what it's showing. Generally it's probably in terms of the intensity has performed the best here lately. Some of of the best in terms of the different vantage points there in terms of the models in the tropics, but the track forecast maybe not so much. So I don't want to just we're not saying it's going to happen for sure yet, even though it's so close in the timeline. But all of a sudden, the other models could jump on board. It's not impossible. So we'll have to just remain alert there. But you see upper 80s there. That's still too warm for this time of year. If we might end up, based on some of the models, get another boundary in here to cool us off front later on as we get to next week. That could be more storms, versus I have 30. Some of the guidance goes lower than that for Sunday, Monday, but I wanted to make sure I didn't want to just put like 10% in there, and then all of a sudden we get this storm to go way west, whatever develops, and we have like outer bands hitting our east coast beaches, fringe effects, sure, but this doesn't really, I don't want to just have, such a low rain chance there, and then have actual direct impacts from a tropical cyclone. So that's why we went 30 there, like Sunday, Monday, even though the guidance would say maybe a little less. So just wanted to make sure we have that up there a little bit, but we'll start to have more moisture come in the picture, assuming the tropics aren't a big factor as we get later into next week past Tuesday. So that's kind of the storyline there. About time to wrap things up, I think. I appreciate everybody tuning in here and trusting me, staying up here pretty late. I mean, waiting for all that model guidance, obviously, and trying to factor that into everything on the different, vantage points here, whether it's, looking at the European model, looking at the DFS model, looking at the H-Warp model, looking at Icon model. There's all the different models to factor in and look at. So, yeah, above average is the story, and that makes you think we got to watch, it's too warm a certain time of year. That can cause issues meteorologically now that we're in the fall and we're actually getting warmer. That's, that can cause, severe weather threats with the interactions with the temperatures, or even tropical cyclone concerns if you have the warmer than normal Gulf and all of a sudden you get a system to sneak in, warmer than normal Atlantic, for this time of year is what I'm saying. We have to just watch it, as we're looking here because that's, instability. So we just have to be aware here and alert for these conditions. So you're not seeing anything's really overwhelming here in the forecast. You see Friday, that's the highest rain chance. Could have some high school football impacts. We'll have to watch for that. Obviously, Bradford's at Keystone there. We'll have to just, be monitoring that, obviously. I know Gators and Miami off this week. Jaguars on the road in California. So that'll be a big game for them against 49ers on Sunday at 4:05 on many local Fox stations. Not all of them in the state because I know the Bucs will be at one on Fox and not able. It's a single header week, so only one game will be available. So I know some markets have to see the Jags. I mean, Jacksonville does, but it's a road game, so even Gainesville, I believe, and maybe it sometimes gets a little iffy, but I believe Gainesville has to still, even Orlando, even though I believe it's Tampa, Philadelphia. That's I think it's going to be in Tampa on Sunday. That's the lead game on Fox. So both games are big in a lot of ways, quite honestly. I must say that maybe the Jag game's a little more important because it's a situation where the Jag did have a loss already as we're looking. But then you say, well, Tampa's playing an NFC opponent, a conference opponent. So both games have quite a bit of meaning. But one's on the road, one's at home. So I know when the game's on the road like that, let me double check that. I want to make sure I'm not saying that wrong real quick because I haven't looked at that Tampa game too much. Let me just double check that. Yeah, it is in Tampa. Philly at Tampa. So, yeah, the game's at Tampa. So, certain markets, when they're at home, Jacksonville's on the road, I believe Orlando. Generally, they might get a waiver. I'm not sure. Things have been a little bit more flexible, it seems like, lately. But I think Orlando has to show the Jaguar game since it's on the road. And, but we'll see how that kind of plays out here as we look at the timeline here and the likes. So they only get one. The other's only available, like on NFL's, paid Sunday ticket program and the like. So that's kind of the storyline there. Again, we'll continue to watch things in the Weather Center. Hope you have a great night. Again, we are watching the tropics. We're going to watch that area of interest If you missed anything in the video, you know, you can go back and watch your things that we've been talking about, that we've been monitoring here. And watch that back on whether it's Facebook, Twitter/X. You know, as soon as this ends, YouTube, you know, you can use the DVR functionality while I'm on. You have to have Twitch there, and you have Carter.com with all the different links available. Have a great night, everybody. Stay safe.